This episode contains some discussions of sensitive topics related to nursing care for veterans. Please listen with care.
On this episode of med-surg Moments,
our very special guest, Colonel Susan Luz.
I came home and I said to my dad, I'm going to Vietnam. My father said, no, you're not. I said, well, why not? If only my father had known that I would face another type of brutality, not in a war zone.
Take us into the mind frame of a veteran who has served in combat duty and help us understand what they've endured.
You know, you're a military nurse when in the middle of the night, you can hear the crackle of the loudspeaker, get to the bunkers, get to the bunkers. Our unit saved the lives of more than 30,000 wounded U.S. soldiers, contractors, Iraqi civilians, and yes, even the terrorists who killed our own soldiers, including one of the only nurses to die in Iraq.
this is Mary Tess,
Sam,
Eric,
Marcella, L.A.,
and Sydney. Welcome to med-surg Moments, the AMSN podcast.
This podcast is an engaging look at the lives of and surrounding medical surgical nurses.
We're proud med-surg nurses just like you, sharing our stories, insights, and experiences to support you in your nursing journey.
As a military nurse myself, I'm very pleased to introduce you to this special episode. Veterans Day was celebrated earlier this month, and today we're honoring those who've served by taking a clear-eyed look at what military veterans bring with them into our care. Their strength, resilience, and often invisible wounds. From PTSD and moral injury to chronic pain and service-connected injuries, veterans' needs are uniquely layered and deeply personal. To help guide us in our conversation, we're extremely honored to introduce you to our very special guest, a military nursing hero and decorated war veteran, Colonel Susan Luz. She is the author of The Nightingale of Mosul, a nurse's journey of service, struggle, and war. With a passion for public and mental health, Susan's nursing career has spanned from the Peace Corps and Army Reserves to the front lines of Iraq as the highest-ranking woman in the 399th Combat Support Hospital. Her work has included helping soldiers with emotional trauma and providing comfort to dying soldiers. Colonel Luz formed her own Band of Sisters, a group of nurses who were not only dedicated to treating wounded soldiers, but also maintaining morale among the troops, especially during the unit's time in the middle of the desert in Asad. In 2007, Susan was awarded the Bronze Star. Susan, it's an honor to have you with us on med-surg Moments.
Thank you, Sydney. I always knew you would be a wonderful nurse, and thank you so much for having me here today on your wonderful podcast, especially since it's Veterans Day.
For those that don't know, Susan was one of my clinical instructors at the University of Rhode Island. And when we were discussing having a Veterans Day episode, I instantly thought of her. I thought there could be no one better for us to talk to you about this topic. So I'm just so excited to have you here. Susan, as is our tradition with all special guests, we'd like to start at the beginning. Can you tell us more about your story?
I grew up in Providence, Rhode Island, with my mother, who was a teacher, and my father, who worked in the post office. And he also did janitorial work in the Providence Journal. It was a newspaper because he wanted all of us to go to Catholic school. My father was a World War II veteran. But the very first person who made me think of nursing was someone else who I lived with. Growing up with my oldest sister, Ellen Ann, and my two younger brothers, Billy and Jackie, we all had a responsibility to care for my mother's oldest sister. Aunt Ellen was a mentally challenged little person confined to a wheelchair and really was like our fifth sibling. We all took care of Ellen. Also, at the time, in the beginning, I wanted to become a nun, just like my mother's first cousin, Sister Norberta. She had graduated from Columbia School of Nursing before entering the convent, so I was all set. I'd be a nun, and then I'd be a nurse as well, helping people like my Aunt Ellen. Back then, you either became a teacher, a secretary, a nurse, or a nun. Boy, have we come a long way, though, right? But I guess my dear mother recognized my Irish wit and that special sparkle in my eyes because I did not become a nun or enter the convent like my two best friends did, who were with me at an all-girls school in Rhode Island. I did become a nurse, graduated from the University of Rhode Island in 1972, and I decided I wanted to go to Vietnam. I came home and I said to my dad, I'm going to Vietnam. My father said, no, you're not. I said, well, why not? He was a Silver Star, Purple Heart under General George Patton, and he wouldn't hear it. He said no, and that was all. So off I went to Brazil in the Peace Corps. Little did I know what ventures lay ahead of me. If only my father had known that I would face another type of brutality, not in a war zone, but doing a humanitarian mission as a Peace Corps volunteer. It's in the book. I didn't go into graphic because I have nieces and nephews. Walking broad daylight is attacked by 3 guys left for dead. I spent months in the hospital. I have visible wounds and invisible wounds. I can't have kids. But God, He had it all worked out for me. I didn't die that day. You choose in life if you want to be a survivor. There are a lot of bad people all over the world, but I'm not a victim, I'm a survivor. And remember that guy who gave up? Neither does anyone else. I grew up overnight that year. After I recovered from my wounds and spent some time in the hospital, I stayed in Brazil after that. I was determined to finish my mission. I know I made a difference. And after the Peace Corps, I returned home, got my master's in community health at Boston University as a clinical nurse specialist. And I would be off to South America again with Project Hope. But I always still wanted to be an Army nurse. It was not until the age of 33 when I was commissioned as a first lieutenant in the Army Nurse Corps that I fully understood why my dad hadn't wanted his younger daughter to face the horrors of war. Nurses died in World War II. The hospitals were bombed in Anzio, Italy. The tents where they slept in the Pacific were shelled. Planes were brought down with the wounded personnel aboard as the nurses were evacuating from forward areas. He didn't want me to die or suffer from the wounds of war we now call PTSD. But I think my biggest love was when I was an Army nurse in Iraq. I did like 47 humanitarian missions. I was a community health nurse. That's what I got my master's in, public health. I knew what I had to do over there. I developed community health and wellness programs, kept my soldiers pretty much healthy and happy, and I cared for their physical and emotional needs. We ran health fairs, we did smoking cessation, weight loss programs, but the big thing that I was in charge of the expectancies, not the American soldiers, but the Iraqi soldiers. They came in, they weren't going to survive, so we took care of them, we took care of civilians, and we gave them morphine, tried to help them, and we also took care of the terrorists. But they got no hugs from me. We tried to make the best of the situation. I was a colonel, I was one of the highest ranking females. I organized cookouts, did dumpster diving, looking for stuff for my troops. I wasn't all trash in there. It was like good stuff that the other units left behind. Beauty parlors for us girly girls. We had a lot of mass casualties where a lot of soldiers were killed and came in. And after a long day, we had cookouts and we worked together as our band of sisters.
It's incredible what you've endured, and then you went on so young to still go to nursing school and still join the military after the things you had gone through and what you'd seen. You thought about being a nun. I think nurses really are as close as you can get to nuns sometimes. just in the sacrifice that sometimes we make at the bedsides. And you have definitely made those on all kinds of bedsides. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Take us into the mind frame of a veteran who has served in combat duty and help us understand what they've endured.
Until I went to war, I did not fully understand what it was like. You know, you're a military nurse. When in the middle of the night, I always just tell everybody, you can hear the crackle of the loudspeaker, get to the bunkers, get to the bunkers. And when it's all over, you see, not in Kansas anymore, mass cows breaking down your door. So was I a hero in the war? No, but I served in a company of heroes. I have cared for a lot of patients in my life, but not all of them were soldiers who would die for their country. I will never forget the heroes that I took care of back in Iraq and Kuwait, Qatar, all the places I've been. Like I said, I did multiple humanitarian missions, but my time in a war zone was totally different. Anyone who has served deals with different things that they've seen and done. I didn't kick down any doors like the soldiers I cared for, but I took care of them when they came back into the MASH hospital. Bristol, Mosul, Iraq, that was a hotbed of insurgent activity in the north, and later in Asad, the dusty outpost in the Syrian desert that became the primary trauma center for American troops through 300 mortar attacks, 16 mass casualties, the after effects of the troop surge. We were there in 2006 when the troop surge was going on, and every day tragedies of life during war. Our unit saved the lives of more than 30,000 wounded U.S. soldiers, contractors, Iraqi civilians, and yes, even the terrorists who killed our own soldiers, including one of the only nurses to die in Iraq. She was just going to lunch with one of the other soldiers when the mortar came into the green zone. Her name was Captain Marie Ortiz. She's buried in Arlington. She received a Purple Heart and Bronze Star with Valor. I got a Bronze Star from Iraq, and I always feel embarrassed about that because so many people died and they got a Bronze Star. It had nothing to do with her being a female that day, but for the courage and selfless service she performed as a soldier. Everybody knew she was a damn good nurse already. But every day that you're there, someone endures some kind of pain and suffering without dying in the battlefield, because you see a lot of your soldiers die. And it's hard to understand what veterans have endured in active combat duty, but I know nurses, just in the civilian world, have a good idea because they take care of people every day. They're not soldiers, but they take care of people every day.
Susan, I'm continuously very touched, and I'm a very visual person, so I can really imagine the words that you're saying, and I feel it. Thank you, all of you, for what you're doing. When you said that we nurses, we see pain at the bedside, when you're describing it, I feel like there's more to it. I can't describe what I'm exactly feeling, but talk about the physical and the mental injuries of our veterans suffer from, especially from post-traumatic stress disorder.
When I came home from Iraq, I was asked, do you suffer from PTSD? You have to go to the VA, and they always ask you the question. In Iraq, I really felt that I wanted to do the best job I could do and always be there for my soldiers, because I knew that they were going to face a lot of things that I faced when I was overseas. Many went home with serious physical injuries, like missing a limb, brain damage from the IEDs and everything. But they also came home with no visible scars and what we call PTSD, what they saw on the battlefield. I was called out in the middle of the night. A young Marine had called home and his girlfriend broke up with him, and he blew his brains out in the phone booth there, and nobody could make calls for a couple of days till they contacted his family. All the soldiers were upset. And I said, oh my gosh, we got to talk to these guys. They weren't thinking about what happened. They were thinking about their own lives. They needed to talk to their families before something happens to them. I can tell you about my very first person that died on my watch. Sergeant Dunkelberger. He was a gunner. And the Specialist Grimm was the gentleman who was driving the Humvee. And Sergeant Dunkelberg came back to where I was taking care of, they call it the expectants. He wasn't supposed to be there. He was supposed to go to the morgue. But he came to our area, and he was already dead. And I was so nervous because he looked like my best friend, Donna, who was in the Peace Corps with me, her son, who was with us in Iraq. He had done 4 years in college, and like me, wanted to go in the military. Oh, he did. He had the red hair. And my enlisted soldier said, "Colonel Luz, that's not Chris Mannion. That's Sergeant Dunkelberger." And I felt so relieved, and I felt so bad. But Sergeant Grimm, who was there, who had brought him in, said, "I'm going to die. I know I'm going to die." And I said, "Oh, sweetheart, you're going to make it through this. I know I'm going to pray for you and everything." A month later to the day, he was blown up. He knew he had a premonition. But people have PTSD from what they saw, you know. My first patient in Asad was, believe it or not, was a German Shepherd dog. He had just lost his handler. And, you know, no sad eyes would be seen that day from the other soldiers. And no wonder how many of them came home with PTSD, committed suicide. Suicide in the military, I think now it's like 17, 18 soldiers a day die from suicide.
That's really just such a heavy topic and thing to think about. Last year, I read the book The Women by Kristen Hanna, historical fiction of nurses in the military in Vietnam. And the pictures that she was painting of these women and their experiences through the combat areas and then what they made at home was very eye-opening to me. And I'm sure it's still even not a full representation of what it really is and what people go through. And it really just feels unimaginable to think about seeing the things that they've seen and having to carry that with you forever. And like you were saying, you get together with the women that you had spent time with and you don't really talk about it, but I think being in each other's company is comfort enough. You all know what each other went through. And so to be able to support each other through that must be a real gift. As nurses, what can we do to help veteran patients in our care who may have recently transitioned from a war zone to being back home?
As a veteran, I would encourage all our veterans to utilize the VA. I go once a year. I have my own personal doctor, but I go there. And it's great when I go there because I see people I know that work at the VA. But, you know, many veterans, when they come home, they turn to drugs, alcohol. They become depressed, get divorced, experience post-traumatic stress. Everybody handles stress differently. My father, he never talked about World War II. Unlike my father-in-law, George Luz Sr., he went to reunions right after the war of World War II with his buddies from the 101st. They even made a mini-series about him. It was called Band of Brothers. My father-in-law was still alive when Stephen Ambrose wrote the book, Band of Brothers. Unfortunately, he was killed in a bad accident. He survived the war only to be killed in a bad accident. He was the funny guy from Rhode Island, if you ever see the miniseries. And the actor Rick Gomez, who portrayed him, did a great job bringing his character alive. And then my brother-in-law, Steve, a Vietnam vet, never talked about his time in the Army. I always thought he had PTSD, never talked about it. But when the miniseries, the show came on, he reached out to his buddies that he served with, and he gets together with them on a regular basis. I always wanted to be a public health nurse. I don't know why. It's probably because I took care of everybody growing up and stuff like that. My niece is a social worker. She's not military or anything. And she gets a lot of questions about soldiers who have just come home from a deployment. People always say, how do you treat the veterans, especially the war veterans that have transitioned from war zone to being back home? The same that you do a regular person. I have PTSD probably from what happened to me, my attack in Brazil. I have friends that experience very bad car accidents, other things that are traumatic. Everybody deals with PTSD differently. Unfortunately, a few of my soldiers, when they came home from Iraq, committed suicide. I never in a million years would have figured those 5 soldiers would have killed themselves. I always say to myself, there's something I could have done because I was really close to everybody. I was like the mother of the group. I was 56 when I went to war. I would go out and buy them all kinds of goodies and stuff, even my own soldiers. And I question myself, is something I could have done, but no one knows what's inside of you. Some people, before they even joined the military, they had issues. Then some people didn't have issues, still saw terrible things. I fortunately had a husband to come home to, a wonderful family, a lot of support system, and especially my band of sisters. We have a big party on Veterans Day. Of course, we go up to the cemetery and see my husband's cousin, Brian. He was only 21. That was his second tour when he got killed. But you know what? He was a Marine. And if he would have come down today, he said, don't cry for me. I was wanting to be a Marine, and I served my country.
You said you're not a hero in the same way as the soldiers that fought, but as that mother, you were that hero at their bedside. Your experiences gave you this otherworldly power to be that mother at that bedside in active war zones. You were there to fill that role in the most perfect way that you were able to because of your experiences. I can tell that you continue to do that for your band of sisters. It's just knowing how to get yourself and others through these such traumatic experiences.
Well, you know, I talked about Sergeant Duckelberger. I got in trouble because some of his soldiers come to see him. He had already passed away, and he had blood and all kinds of dirt all over his face. And I washed his face, and later I got in trouble for doing that because he hadn't gone to the morgue yet. And I said to myself, really? I'm in Iraq. There's no way I'm going to leave him. I stayed with him until his body was transferred to the morgue, and when they transferred him back to Dover. I really didn't care. I've always been a free soul, as my mother always said of the 4 kids. I would take care of like my Aunt Ellen. I remember once when she was out in the car and everybody was making fun of her. She couldn't walk and everything. They were making fun of her. I was going to kick their butt. My mother said, Sue, we don't do that kind of things. You know, you just have to know people don't know any better. I still would have washed his face. And to this day, I go to a lot of the boots on the ground and I see a lot of the soldiers that passed away on my watch. I go there and I read where they're from and everything to take care of my soldiers.
Hearing your stories again, especially now that I have the perspective of being in the military as a nurse, a lot of people don't understand just how important that sense of community is and how quickly those bonds form. I was stationed overseas the last couple of years, and my little band of sisters is just some of the closest friends I think I'll ever have. And we knew each other for a year, maybe 2. The sense of community that you build with people that are in similar and extreme situations are just relationships that are always going to last. But while there's a lot of talk about PTSD and the physical injuries that veterans have endured, there's also the often less spoken issue of sexual trauma. How can we best help patients who have endured sexual trauma during their service?
Well, as a victim of sexual trauma myself, at our VA in Providence, we females have our own separate place. Only females go there for their care, and they have the therapy in groups for the female soldiers, especially who've had sexual trauma, because they don't want to go into the hospital and talk about it, and there's guys next door and everything else. So it's a real personal place to go. And actually in Iraq, we had a soldier come in, a young soldier that was assaulted by one of her own soldiers. They were both in their 20s, and she had the courage to come in and be examined by us and everything. I never told her what happened to me, but I just hold her hand. I listened to her, and I told her we're going to get you some help. Everybody was saying, oh, they must have just been boyfriend and girlfriend. No, they weren't. It was a sexual assault. And we had another female, young enlisted soldier. A male practitioner took advantage of her, and she had the courage to talk about it. I actually accompanied him and another officer to Baghdad for trial, because he had his big trial back home, but he thought he could get away with it because she was enlisted and he was an officer. No, we don't tolerate that. Some people never probably talked about it, but I hope now that they will be able to, because the word is out. You know, we don't tolerate that anywhere, not only in the military, but anywhere.
Your strength and resilience is so inspiring because as difficult as it is when people are at their lowest, sometimes it feels disrespectful to tell someone who's struggling that they can get through it, that they can survive this just because you know how low they're feeling and how I felt that in my own life at times. Like, you don't want to hear someone tell you you can get past this because in that moment, it feels like you can't, whatever you're going through. As a nurse, as a mom, as a woman in a male-dominated field, and horrible things happen. But it's really inspiring, and it gets me really excited to remember that there are happier endings and there's the light out of that when you say, I'm going to do this. The strength is really inspiring. So thank you for that.
You know, I'm not a Pollyanna, but when I think of the bad things that happened, I think of the good things that happened there. We saved a lot of lives. And I'm so proud of that. I'm proud of my service. I'm proud of my soldiers I serve with. I remember I was transporting patients from Iraq to launch to the Army hospital, and this one guy was yelling at me. And I said, oh, you must be talking to the med-surg nurse. He said, no, Colonel Luz, I want to talk to you. He was on a stretcher. He had just got shot. He was in Mosul, where I was. And he said, the active duty nurses came in and they're not the same as the reservists. He said, we love you guys. And I said, what? You miss our candy and our cookies and our hugs and everything? Because we weren't afraid to just be nurses that love our patients. And I think all nurses are like that. I know my friend Sydney over there. She was a wonderful nurse. I had her as a senior at the University of Rhode Island.
No, Susan, everything you did there was just as important and just as inspiring. But believe it or not, we're out of time. Susan, it's truly been an inspiration and an honor having you on this episode of Med-Surg Moments.
I always say it on Veterans Day, Memorial Day, but it's a quote from Shakespeare's. From this day to the end of the world, we in it shall be remembered. For he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother. We few, we happy few. We band of brothers. And may I say tonight on this podcast, we band of sisters and nurses, for we serve too. Thank you so much. I was nervous about this, but I appreciate you guys, and you made me feel so comfortable. You think I'd be uncomfortable, and I was. I'm more uncomfortable on a podcast like this.
Thank you so much, Susan.
That was beautiful. To our listeners, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
We look forward to connecting with you on the next episode of Med-Surg Moments, the AMSN podcast.
In the meantime, we encourage you to subscribe to Med-Surg Moments wherever you listen to podcasts.
To reach us, use hashtag MedSurgMoments on your social posts.
Or send us an email at amsnpod@amsn.org. That's amsnpod@amsn.org.
We are all AMSN members, and if you love Med-Surg Moments, we invite you to become a member of AMSN. You can learn more at www.amsn.org.
Finally, the content within the Med-Surg Moments podcast represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of the co-hosts and may not necessarily reflect the views, thoughts, and opinions of the Academy of Medical Surgical Nurses.
Until next time, this is Eric,
Mary Tess,
Sam,
Calais.
Marcella.
And Sydney. And always remember, Med-Surg Moments is a moment in our lives and a moment in our Med-Surg careers that makes a huge difference.